Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the System 2 podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Edricco, who has had a number of roles, including co-founder, managing director at Spins, which is a really cool data company. And more recently, he's an executive leader at Charm.io, where it is a really cool data company that's got some really interesting TikTok data among other data sets. Edricco, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
What have you seen change in the world of data throughout your career?
Oh man, I had a 20 plus year career in the data world, expanding from my early days at Nielsen, now NIQ, to majority of my time spent at Spins. I'm looking at the natural channel data as well as conventional. And now on the side of Charm .io, which we're exploring direct to consumer and TikTok shop data. So the change is really, has been around how consumers and brands are leveraging insights to grow their business. I mean, POS sales data has always kind of been around. It's kind of been like the foundational playbook of like, hey, I'm in a retailer. How do I perform? Well, how things look. I think where folks still kind of learn is like the consumer panel side. How does that data look? How is the consumers purchasing the data? And now we're even getting to an earlier stage of what's happening on the social scene. What's happening on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Kind of what's happening on the D2C on their own platforms. So really kind of evolution being, hey, POS was the gold standard, and it's kind of feeling like people are doing a more of an earlier read of what's happening in the market before you even get to sales. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was mentioning that I think, I back in the day, you always thought like, hey, POS sales was awesome, and that's like it's hard to beat that because it's a very good truth. But I think when you think about investing and you think about like how investors think, and if you relate it to the data side, it's like if it hits the POS sales market, it's like kind of everybody already knows about it. So it's kind of like if your buddy told you in the stock market to invest in this brand or invest in this company, everybody already knows about it. The D2C, social signaling, TikTok, online stuff, those are the early signals that you can make, hey, what's going to happen next? Kind of where those hedge funds and folks, people are kind of looking at the data before it actually goes mainstream. So hopefully that helps you.
Yeah, I love how there's such an arms race. And to your point of sale data was, I mean, it still is like a gold standard for a lot of these metrics. And yet, when it becomes commoditized, you want to look earlier and earlier for these kinds of signals. When you mentioned investors using this data, CPG brands are also consuming it. I'm curious, like, the range of users that find your data helpful.
Yeah, at Charm, we have three key ICPs that we work with: retailers, investors, as well as brands in the space. And so each one kind of they blend the lines of like how they all leverage the data a bit. From a retailer investor standpoint, we have two different platforms at Charm. Well, let me just take one step back, I guess, and explain who Charm is and what we're doing. Charm.io is a direct consumer TikTok shop data intelligence platform. So we track globally 4.5 million plus brands on D2C, and then we track TikTok shop data sales globally as well. So today we have two distinct platforms. As we grow, we're gonna merge these together and have one solid platform. So as we look at a retailer and how a retailer would leverage Charm in their day-to-day lives is that they really want to get some early signals on what's happening on the D2C side. What are some up and coming brands that are growing, bringing in consumers? What the consumers are looking for? So we track web traffic, we track signals from, like I mentioned, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We can see kind of how much advertisement are these brands running on the D2C side. So it really gives a retailer an idea of like, hey, is this brand making some noise that might not be on their radar, hasn't hit the POS sales system yet, market. Similar on the investor side, on the D2C side. And for those early signals, what brands are happening. I mean, again, comes back to what I mentioned earlier was, if you're an investor and you're looking at POS sales data consistently, and that's the only thing you're looking at, you kind of already seen what everyone else is investing in. You want to get the early read. So the D2C side and TikTok shop kind of helps you do that, get that early read. And then
Have
brands.
you seen examples of that where there's a brand that is doing some amount of sales in on the point of sale side, but then when you look at TikTok, they're just blowing it out of the water, or is that not happening yet?
No, I think TikTok is so new that there are brands that are, entering the landscape. Some of them have. There's no one that I've run into. Say that I'm fairly new to Charm, 3 months in, so I haven't had a whole lot of energy into like understanding all the brands that are playing on there. And there's so many brands entering on a day to day basis that it's a new platform for folks. I will take a step back and say, in my earlier days when I was at Spins, Seek was a brand that was doing very, very well on online. And we had some Amazon data at that point in time through our acquisition of ClearCut. And so I looked at it, and I think they were doing, don't quote me on it, but it might have been like $35 million or so on Amazon sales, but it was doing hardly anything in POS. And so I learned at them, I was at a Target event for e-commerce brands that they were bringing in, and I ran across them, and I looked at the app that I built when I was at Spins for sales, and I looked at them like, oh, they're doing nothing. And then I came home and looked at my computer, opened up our Amazon sales data, and looked at it, and I was like, crap, they're doing like 35 million or so in sales. It's actually a really large brand. And there's a lot of stories like that are, go to D2C first, crush it on D2C, and just don't show up yet on sales and sales.
Yeah, it's got to be, to your point, like very interesting as these sales channels, the mix is changing, and depending on where you launch, how much success you have in these other channels you could be missing a large chunk of the picture if you don't have access to all this data.
Yeah, I being at Charm now, it's like you look at across, and having worked in the data business for 20 plus years, it feels like, everyone has a seat at the table, right? And at some point you need every kind of set of data set to look at, right? Everyone has their placing. So when you have your if you have your big meal, you have your salad fork as a kind of like you have your salad fork, your soup spoon, and your all the different utensils you have. It's like almost you need the same thing in your data set that you're working with, right? You have your main one, which is probably your POS, because that's essentially a source of truth, in a sense, because you're getting direct sales data from what's sold across retail. But you still need everything else to make those decisions.
For sure. You mentioned that you guys have three types of buyers: the investors, the retailers, and yeah, you're gonna chat a little bit more about the brand side of it. I'm curious how they're thinking about data.
Yeah, on the brand side, we start to look at it as there's two types, because you have those strategics that are out there. So you have like the Unilevers, Procter and Gamble, Mondelez, Nestle, and et cetera. There's two levers that they're leveraging. They would leverage a charm platform for. One is, what brands can they be looking to source? Because they're usually, they're part acquirers as well. And so they're typically looking to say, hey, what's happening in the marketplace? What are some of these other D2C brands that are crushing it, that can bring a different consumer to our portfolio that we have? And then on the TikTok shop side, it is strongly becoming a channel. So think of it, it's not a halo, it's a halo effect. It's a, live streaming discovery platform, but it's becoming a strong, strong channel. And so they're thinking about, how do we play in this new universe? What does success look like to enter this channel? So it's like, everyone's been waiting, I think, for a long time for a new channel to open up to get new distribution, in a sense. And I think TikTok Shop is nailing it right now with a new channel. Everyone's trying to figure out, all right, we know there's a halo effect, but how much revenue can we make off of this as well? And there are some good brands doing well on TikTok Shop.
What in terms of the brands doing well on TikTok Shop, I'm curious about the type of company that's doing well there, as well as the public perception of that company. I've heard stories of the dollar stores, for example, getting hit because people are now buying these cheaper price point items on TikTok Shop. And to me, it seems like there's less of a stigma if you sell cheaper things on TikTok versus if you sell it in a dollar store. So if you're a D2C brand trying to expand in a new channel, and you had the option of going into these into dollar store versus now you're going to TikTok, and I'm curious how the landscape of other channels, like, is this growing the market? Is it cannibalizing other retailers that would otherwise sell these types of products? Like, how should brands think about TikTok Shop?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great. And I'm glad you asked that, because, I think in the beginning stages, TikTok Shop was like, people thought of it as cheaper brands, right? Little dinky things that you can buy online, bunch of resellers, opening up shops and selling, cheap products. That is not the case anymore. whatsoever. Fast forward to now, I mean, 3 months that I've been here, 3.5 months that I've been at Charm. I mean, you got Comfort, which is a clothing brand who's blowing it up on there. It's a large brand. They're not a cheap brand. It's a great brand. Goalie is doing a really great job on TikTok Shop. There's a lot of brands that are now coming into the market and saying, okay, this was maybe it started off that kind of in that platform. That's not where it's at today. That's not where it's growing. I mean, you still have shops that people are selling, random stuff. It's a capitalist economy. Everyone's trying to make some money, but brands are getting on there. I think, TikTok Shop really gears towards today. Beauty, personal care, VMS brands do really well. We're starting to see a bit of a surge on food and beverage brands. I think you got to kind of be mindful because of shipping cost and stuff as you're kind of online and doing direct to consumer stuff. Apparel does really well on there. Smaller end consumer electronics we see that do well on TikTok Shop as well. So I mean, there's a lot of different avenues that are going, but it's not just for the inexpensive brands anymore. It's really geared towards large brands figuring out now this is a new revenue. I mean, I'm talking to so many people over the last couple of weeks where it's like, my role didn't exist 3 weeks ago at our company, which is
Wow.
pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see that.
What is that role? Just like on TikTok in particular, focusing on TikTok?
TikTok, D2C, channel strategy work stuff where it's like, hey, maybe they weren't as focused as much on it, but some of these companies are starting to have someone focused to not only D2C, but the creator aspect, because TikTok Shop is really, it's a creator driven platform that is driving awareness. It's that discovery. And then you have adjacent people that are all trying to get into the game of Amazon Live, whatnot, et cetera, that are doing these live streaming and selling products. So it's just way folks are trying to engage consumers today is totally expanded from the days of, hey, you didn't find something out unless you went to the grocery store or your buddy told you that, hey, you got to try this out, or you went to a dinner event and someone had something and you're like, hey, it's cool, or your buddy's wearing a new shirt and you're like, hey, where'd you get that at, right? Or who makes that? There's so much way that people are getting content and consumers are receiving information. I mean, you see it today if you watch anything on Amazon Prime, right? It's like almost every other commercial is like, click here to buy. It's like it's almost like gambling all over again. You just hit the button and it's like your box is showing up every single day, from TikTok Shop, Amazon, etc. It's like, or right from direct to consumer websites too. It's like, they're all just making it easier for consumers to purchase, and they're fighting for that time.
Yeah, like on the content side, you and I were both at a conference recently, and someone was talking about how protein powders are doing really well on TikTok. And I was like, why? I was like, well, because it's you can make like good content with the powders. Like okay, what's the content? It's like, well, you pour them in a glass of water, and that's it. Sometimes it changes color. It blew my mind how like stupid and like simple some of these videos are that end up going viral. Like I would have never thought that a powder would photograph well. Like you can create any sort of interesting, compelling content on a regular like television, and yet in these like TikTok videos, it ends up going viral because yeah, you swirl it around and it changes color or whatever. I'm curious, yeah, how you think about that piece of it, like how brands can, and especially if you're a more, I don't know, old school like marketing person, that probably would not think of that, of how to actually, like, this is like this way of pouring my product into something else is like that is the entire ad, and it can go viral. Like, how should marketers think about the content they're creating on TikTok?
Yeah, no, it is mind blowing that I was at a conference right before Expo West. There was a brand day at TikTok Shop's office in LA, and I was there, and they had a few creators as part of the group, and it blew my mind on some of the things that they talked about on how creators, how they work with creators, some of the things that how you best partner with a good creator, but again, some of those things on the content side where I'm finding some of the marketers that are on the brand side are asking, hey, we have in our database, you can also click and see creator content and you can see the videos that are created. One of the things that come up is like, can they also help you to find out, like, do you lean to the left? Do you lean to the right? Do you push into the camera? Like, what things are the creators doing that are driving engagement? Which I think you were mentioning here. Yeah, like one of the things was the creator was telling me that in addition to like just powders and being mixed and like having cups to swirl in and stuff, is that they make a mess sometimes. and then believe it how viral that goes. She's like, I know I make like I do it purposely to like, and people were like, oh my goodness, like she just dumped half of it on the counter or whatever it is. It's just like, it's like, and then that takes off, and it keeps going. So you just never know exactly what the consumers are going to be looking at and what drives engagement. Someone will hit it and you ride that wave for a long time. And then all of a sudden, you have to kind of create a new content and something from there. So I think marketers are really, really thinking about that more today. They're trying to figure out the legacy, retailers and legacy brands are trying to figure out like, all right, it's not just our packaging anymore. It's about like, what kind of story could be told eh, through the product.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating how it's making a mess sells on those channels, and I'd imagine when to your point, like keeping track of what other content creators are doing is an interesting way to see what you should also be doing, and it's not like the burden of creativity falls only on the marketing department. Like that is part of the appeal of TikTok. Is like there's so much random user generated content on there. That's great.
They are really, to my opinion, again, this is my opinion, is I feel like the creator world is becoming all of the new brand ambassadors. Like there are a lot of these creators too are also what I'm understanding and early on is that they're also working with the brands. So brands are, not only are like, hey, they're outsourcing and they working, but they truly do become a brand ambassador. I was talking to someone else a few weeks back, and we were mentioning back in the early days when I would go to Expo West, which is a large conference for natural health and wellness products. Kind launched, just launched and stuff, and you'd be like, man, there is like 300 people here from Kind. Like, is there that big of a company? And they were still kind of early on. And then you realize you go talk to them and they're like, we're just brand ambassadors. Now you don't see that. And what you saw this year at Expo West is a ton of TikTok shop creators and a bunch of creators walking around. And it's like, that's the new ambassador. It's the new way of marketing. And then, some are in-house because there's your people that need to manage those creators, right? In the content, because you have to be able to give them and educate them on your product. Right. So like, just because you and I receive something doesn't mean that we're fully educated on the product. And so you need someone to help them educate the product, the story you want to tell, does it fit to your brand, and et cetera. And so, yeah, it's amazing. I think it's just, it's a new world. And I think what happens too is people are understanding that creators are paid, right? But like what the value that people are getting from the creators is they look like you and me, right? It's not an actor. It's not someone. It's like it's you and me who's like, we found something we like, we post it, and maybe it goes viral, and people are like, hey, I like Matei. I like the same things Matei likes. Like, it's cool. Like I'm into working out or whatever. Like I'm gonna try it, and you get the hook, and there you go, and it could be off to the races, right? So I think that's the cool thing about it. I mean, people know what you're getting into when you're watching the videos. You know that they're getting paid for it, but you have a more relatable content.
Yeah. There's another side to TikTok Shop that I'm curious to get your take on, which is how much they charge, like their take rate on sales. Like my understanding is that it can be quite high, like 30% ish. And so if you're a brand that doesn't have high gross margins, you can't sell on TikTok. And so it ends up skewing towards beauty products and these CPG brands that have significantly higher gross margins where they can afford to pay 30% of it to the platform. Like I'm curious, has that changed? Is that still true? Or what's like how does that factor into which brands can be successful there?
I'm not probably educated enough to speak to like the cost of joining. I don't know it from that much. We're basically a data supplier for like the information posts, like once they're on board. We do track commission rate, which is available to understand. And so those could be, decently high, but you have to think about it. It's not only a channel, but it's that halo effect. And so you are paying a little bit more. I mean, some people will leverage, TikTok Shop's own fulfillment. You can use a 3PL fulfillment and et cetera. So like, in any business cost adds up, but you have to look at it. Where does it, if you can drive a much engagement, if you're going to get a ton of incremental sales off of TikTok Shop, and you're also going to get people directing back to your D2C site, Amazon, wherever else you're selling, it's probably worth it. It's kind of like, I'm not going to say it's like a lost leader in a sense of like, hey, you gotta figure it out, but it's one of those avenues where it's going to create more revenue for you being on TikTok Shop.
Yeah, no, super interesting. Let's pivot a little bit. I'm curious about your career and how you got into the data world to begin with. Is this something that you as a kid were like, "Oh, I love data. I want to go into this," or how did you stumble into it?
No, it's a great question. Growing up, I was really into strategy, and I was really into think. I always kind of wanted to run a business. That was kind of like I played sports in high school, and like is your senior year in your paper, they had say like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it was like, I want to be a CEO. I want to run a business. So I've always kind of wanted to do that, and big part of it is I've had some really good mentors throughout my career and just kind of understanding like, hey, you got to learn a lot of different things, but it's really about the strategy and how do you grow your business through strategy. And so I spent my early career in the entertainment industry. And so I was fortunate enough to work for my father was the senior vice president of sales at Sony Pictures. So I grew up in sales, around sales my whole entire life, learned the entertainment world inside and out. Was fortunate enough to do that for a few years after college. And then I pivoted into retail merchandising and working for a large merchandising company servicing Walmart in the entertainment sector that they have.
Well,
And
yeah,
so
say more about that pivot. How do you go from like hanging out with movie stars to working on the retail side?
Yeah, so I worked for a smaller entertainment company called New Market Capital Group, which we invested in films like Passion of the Christ, American Pie, and so on. And so we had sold a lot of the A movies to the studios, and then we kept a lot of the B movies. I ran another business. So I graduated in finance, corporate finance and business law. So I was doing a lot of financial work for them and, smaller size of the organization. We business kind of we took it down that entity that we had, and so there was an opportunity for me to join another company that was servicing Walmart, and they essentially work with record labels, the studios, book publishers inside of Walmart, and we owned our own product and distributed. So it was similar in the entertainment industry. So I would help bring in new release Tuesday, I would bring in, acts to come in and sign autographs and play in a new Walmart, location and stuff. So it was actually kind of in the same tied to the same industry. It just was all on the entertainment side. And that's where I really kind of found the power of data because we were, talking to regional managers, district managers, store managers with reports on how well things were selling in their store and how do we bring in more fixtures and more displays. And I learned to talk really fast and get everything out as much as I can, which is kind of inhibits today because sometimes you see I talk pretty fast, but it's like you learn to talk to a store manager, district manager. They'll walk in the stores to kind of get out, hey, this is why you need to have a display here, and how it's going to drive more revenue for your store. So I learned from it early on, like supply chain, inventory management, et cetera, like how the retail in the back end works. Fast forward, went to graduate school. In graduate school, I joined Nielsen at that time, and so there was an emerging brands team that I joined there. I laugh because of the emerging brands team. Those were like Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts was just kind of getting into like they had products, but they were just getting into data. Those are some of my clients in the emerging brands group today, and so
That's amazing.
yeah, loved helping those brands because you leveraging my ability on the retail side and how you have to like the data and strategy how supports you because what it gets down to is how do you execute at retail and how does that consumer pick it off the shelf? And at my time at Nielsen, I learned a ton. It was a great organization to be part of. A lot of classes I was able to take. That's where I learned more about consumer panel and new product launches and testing, concept testing, and et cetera, and kind of put it all together. And then, had the fortune enough we worked with a company called Spins when I was at Nielsen, and I knew health and wellness was up and coming, and I had a great chance to join that organization. And so did that and spent, majority of the last 14 plus years helping to build that through our broker distributor relationships. I built out our private equity business and ran that, built products and solutions for Spins, as well as did a lot with our retailers and recruiting and working with our retail partners. So kind of fortunate enough, Tony Olson, who was the president, now is chairman of the board there, gave me a lot of opportunity to expand and grow. He knew I wanted to run a business one day, and I think he really just kind of allowed me to flourish inside the organization.
Yeah, I love that story from career advice perspective, where you wouldn't think there's a linear relationship between working on films to then working with Walmart. But to your point, it's like, yeah, like Walmart sells a lot of media, and that was your entry point into this like large organization. And from there, they go from Walmart discovering data. I mean, if you were to look at this in a vacuum, you wouldn't think there's any like clear causal relationship between these jobs, but there was. Like, yeah, the entertainment got you from entertainment to the Walmart. Walmart got you to data. Data got you to Nielsen, and then Nielsen got you to Spins, and now from Spins to Charm. It sounds like, yeah, that plays around social media where content is going, being much earlier stage and identifying these up and coming brands before other people really, yeah, really discover them as well. How I don't know, I guess, yeah, looking back on your career, and it seems like this whole content creator social media side of it has some echoes in the film world where you started. Is this in some ways like a homecoming, combining all the things that you worked on into the dream job?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I never thought of it that way. That it was that it actually is pulling together the pieces of content creation to merging the data aspect to still supporting strategy for an organization to figure out, hey, how do you grow your business? One of the big things I like to talk about when I'm doing presentations or just talking to brands is that data is so important in how you play your strategy game. And I'm a big sports person. And so I always tell them, like, there's a reason why in the NFL that, a running back comes out on third down and short, right? Or there's a third down and long, because there's the statistics that tell you who's the better in position to put there. You're going to win sometimes if you forget and you're like, oh, all right, he got through. Our offensive line did it. But you're using data to make the appropriate decisions and have the higher probability. And so I just love that aspect of thinking about, there's the same way you can leverage data across your organization, and how can you help companies, whether it be a retailer, an investor, or brands, become more data driven organization and rely on insights to help at least direct it and give you that extra push and confidence. You still need that common sense to think about, hey, we've done this before, it doesn't quite work, a gut check. But I think data really helps you understand the strategy and kind of helps you put it to real life when you see the numbers.
On the strategy points, we have to talk about AI changing a lot of people's strategy. In some cases, there's existential threats to businesses. Data seems to be a kind of a moat where you maybe the AI models become more commoditized, but if you have access to differentiated data, that can still be an advantage. I'm curious, yeah, if you think about the strategic side of what you're doing, or when you're thinking about brands, how is AI going to fit into all this? How is it going to mess everything up or create a lot of opportunities?
Yeah, I think right now you're right. I think there's two avenues that are coming on here, and I'm seeing it more. And not to say I'm kind of reading into it. I don't have the direct pulse, but platforms that were BI solution platforms seem to be kind of like, I'm not going to say that they're struggling or they're not struggling, but it seems like I'm seeing more marketing materials come out from them across LinkedIn and other places, because AI is changing that format. There's so much you can do with Claude, right? There's so many things that companies are now figuring out. Is like, do you necessarily need and this is again only my opinion, do you necessarily need a BI solution? Back in the days, like when we first launched it, Nielsen and et cetera, it's like you got to have a really cool, slick BI solution that shows the data. Well, with AI, that's kind of like scrapping it. You need to have really good, clean data to go into those models. But then the other aspect is the companies, like, what are we going to allow into these models at an organization? Right? Because that's training models. There's all this other stuff that's going on above my pay grade. But it's like, in a sense of, that's where the conundrum is that, yes, I think the mode is going to be, do you have really good, clean data that no one has? I think the BI solution is kind of being more of a nice to have. It's kind of like, hey, you want it to make it look really good and people see what it can do, but they're going to end up building their own AI models internally and leveraging, whether it be Claude or somebody else, they're building those models. But I think the issue is like, where is everyone going to lie? Is how much data they're going to allow? How much is Nielsen or Spins or Circana or name it? Euromonitor, et cetera, Numerator. How much it's a charm is going to allow you to put into to that model, right? Because then it's like almost a wild, wild west. So I think that is still like the stage of, we do some stuff on our own with AI. And so, we support our clients with the data set and a platform. But if they want additional AI reporting, we do that ourselves today.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, it is. These are the important questions around like how much is going to be done by Anthropic versus the other companies in the space. To the extent that yeah, you have data, you have like different ways of thinking about the data. There could be a differentiator there. What I want to go back a little bit to the film side of it. I'm curious from so you mentioned this was you started working at your dad's company when you first started. Like what was that like? What was it like to work with family and what lessons did you get from that?
Yeah. So I didn't actually work with my dad. I worked in the same industry that
Mm.
my dad did. And so I'll tell you that I felt like it was a journey for me because he was really good at what he did. And he's retired now and is a lot older, but he was really phenomenal at video sales and the record business and the entertainment side. And so he was always hesitant, having, his son want to do the same thing he wants to do, right? And it wasn't easy. Like I would go to dinners when I was in high school with him when he would be in town or be somewhere and I'd be like, "Hey, can I come to dinner with you and just learn?" Like what's happening. So I learned like what good salespeople do, what good salespeople don't, what bad salespeople like, what they don't do at during dinners and stuff. So I was kind of like a student of the game, you might say, early on because I really wanted to show him like I knew the business. And
How did when he would bring you in? I'm curious, like, how old were you when you first started doing this? And how did he, like, introduce you to the other person?
yeah,
What
he
yeah.
would just bring me to like I would, back in the early days. It's funny when he was in the record business and he would travel around to record stores. I would go with him and then learn how he's selling, how he's talking to people. Sometimes it'd be like I'd be waiting in the car, that type of thing. Back when it was legal to do that, right?
Yeah.
You wait in the car, dude. Dad's in the video store for 3 hours, right? And you're like, like what's going on? Hey, I just gonna do a quick store check, early on days. It was early and we he would just hey, my son's here to have dinner. Like it wouldn't be a big deal because he was ahead and so it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I would just talk to folks. I would kind of outgoing, sure, hey, what's going on? I played sports, so a lot of people were interested in like what's happening in my sports world and stuff. I remember calling his boss one time. I remember him saying, "Hey, you want to get in the entertainment business? So and so is going to be in town." And we lived in Michigan. He's like, "Why don't you call him and ask him to go to dinner?" And I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. So I did. And he was like, "Hey, I really appreciate that." Like tap on the head, good guy. But I got some plans. But it's like I just
So
put
this
myself
was like
out there.
a celebrity athlete that you're just cold calling?
No, it was my dad's boss at,
Okay,
at
yeah, yeah,
Sony Pictures. And he was
yeah.
my dad's like, "Hey, he's in town for a meeting and stuff, but you got to learn this." My dad was traveling somewhere else. He's like, "He's in town. Why don't you give him a call and see if he's got availability?" And so I called him up
I
and said,
love
"Hey, would
that.
you have time to go to dinner?" And he's like, you know, "I've had other plans. I appreciate you reaching out," type of thing. I learned and learned from him. And then I remember, at one point it was hard to like get into him and have him make introductions. And at one point I met him. I was in college and I met him halfway. He We had a dinner meeting and I met up with him and I told him, "Hey, Dad, I really want to do what you do. I really want to be in the entertainment industry and stuff." And we were in a national Coney Island. It's big in the Detroit area, and he drilled me on the entertainment industry and like literally. And then that was the final day. He was like, "You know what? You can do this. I'll let you. Here's numbers. Go call people." He would never let me. And I was like my senior year of college, and it was just like so. It wasn't one of those scenarios where it's like your dad just kind of like helped you out and like kind of figured out and said, "Hey, go ahead and I got connections. I'll make this work for you." He made me work to like go figure out like this is what I'm gonna do because he didn't want me screwing up and I didn't want to screw up. So I really had to learn the business and make sure I understood how it operates before he would even say, "Here's 5 people for you to go call to see if there's opportunities after you graduate." I kind of learned
Yeah.
the hard way.
I love how, yeah, he tested you on your knowledge, and then the reward wasn't, "Oh, I'll introduce you to some people." It's like, "I'll just give you some phone numbers. You have to do the calling." How, like, and even when you called your dad's boss and he just, like, blew you off, did you get discouraged? Like, did you not want to cold call people anymore? Like, it sounds like, yeah, you just went back to cold calling people.
No, yeah. I mean, no, I just went back to calling folks, because I knew that was my way in. right? Like when you're fortunate enough and your dad or your mom or whoever it might be, in your family is really good at what they do, you have that, there's that sim that, people look at you like, well, you're just getting there because of them, right? And we didn't want that to have happen. I mean, I came from my grandpa was in the trades, my dad was the first, white collar, didn't go to college. My brother and sister were the first ones that went to college. It was kind of one of those where it's like, hey, we just worked really hard. And we know it's like, hey, if you keep knocking on doors, someone's going to open up, but you're going to go build your own legacy. I think one of the greatest things was actually moving from the entertainment to the more retail side and merchandising the data business, because I learned so much from that aspect, but I kind of also got out of under the, hey, you're John Rena's son. Like I feel like I built my own career and my own, network and people
Mm.
respecting to what I do on the data side and the retail side than being just, hey, you're John Rena's son.
Yeah, it's super fascinating, especially now. Yeah, I have kids and thinking about these kinds of issues. I'm curious how, despite advantages a kid might have or not, when you're making that initial phone call, especially because you were making that phone call, how did you sell it to them? Like, who you have like nothing at that point. You haven't done anything, except learn, I guess, a lot about the industry. Like, I'm fascinated about this, like the fake it till you make it concept, where in the beginning, whether you're starting a new company or you're on a new career in a new industry, like there's some element of like fake it till you make it. And like, what does that look like when you have basically nothing to show them because you're just a kid? How do you get them to be like, oh yeah, this kid's got something, I'd want to bring him on?
You know, it was really me calling and was asking for advice. Hey, my dad, I would let him know. I mean, that time email wasn't even really going. I mean, now we're really kind of dating ourselves, right? They maybe, I'm sure they knew. I'm sure my dad said, "Hey, my son's going to reach out," right? Then it's on you to reach out, and then so they kind of know it's coming. But it really is more of like, I would want some advice. Like I was thinking about doing marketing, and one of his bosses at Sony was a marketing person from Michigan State, and he went off and led Sony Music and stuff. And so I called him up and said, "Hey, David, I'm really interested in doing marketing. I'm in economics right now, and I'm thinking about pivoting and et cetera. I'm not sure." So I really called to ask for advice, and then you learn to build a relationship with somebody. And he mentioned, he's like, "Hey, if I was to do it again, I wouldn't do marketing. I would do accounting or finance." And talked to me why, and I kind of went back and forth, and I pivoted from an economics major to corporate finance. But it was really more building a relationship of just asking for advice, checking in. Like I would check in and just give updates. Hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm looking to do. Any advice you have? It's really more around that than really asking for somebody for something. It's like really just more of being a general conversation, especially when you don't have anything to offer. But, I think if you're surrounded by good people and good people want to, offer advice and help out, I think it's good. Like I enjoy doing that. I do that with a lot of folks where, hey, just if you need any advice, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and guide you and share my experience. Take it or leave it, but I just want to like share experience. Don't fall into the same things I did. Here's where I made mistakes, and you have to be honest with yourself. I've had meetings where people gloated about themselves the whole time, and I walked away with nothing from it. Right? So you got to also kind of know who you're calling and not be afraid to put yourself out there. It's nerve wracking. I mean, you get nervous, your palms are sweaty, everything is you're trying to call. You're like, how is this going to go? They're probably not going to pick up for you. It's like goes into voicemail, et cetera. And like now you got to like leave a message and like, or am I going to sound professional enough? Because I have, you look at your resume when you graduate high school or college, and you think you're crushing it. I have a sophomore in college at Creighton, and I'm like, you think you're crushing it. And you look at your resume and you're like, you go back, you're like, how did I get my first job?
Oh yeah.
There was
Oh,
nothing on there of importance, you know?
I love that. Yeah, speaking of, yeah, being nervous to make that first call, I remember trying to just amping myself up, be like, you're about to dial, but then you don't dial. You're like, oh, what am I gonna say? Did you ever go through that where you're like, oh, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go press the button and see what happens?
Yeah, yeah. The script goes out, right? You have it. You write your key points, but as soon as you get on, you're like, all right, this has got to just be natural. Like I just gonna wing it and go from there. And so I think people appreciate that a little bit more. I think also it's about being respectful of people's time. If you ask for 5 minutes, stick to 5 minutes. I try to stick to four and say, hey, can I have a few more minutes or move on to something else. So you just want to be respectful.
I love a lot of the advice or the things that you were doing, starting with the advice piece, where it's a lot easier to ask for advice than it is to ask for a job. And especially if you're, yeah, if you're younger and you're calling somebody older, oftentimes, yeah, they don't mind giving advice. I mean, the odds of them doing that are much higher than if you said, "Hey, I need a job. Do you wanna talk to me?" And it is so underutilized. I get so many cold messages on LinkedIn and otherwise where they say, "Oh, let me talk to you about this, this, or this." But if they just said like a one line, like, "Hey, I'm whatever, young kid in this thing. I'm looking for some advice. You have a couple of minutes to talk to me." That is a whole nother. You're much more likely to say yes to that. But it's your point. You got to stick to it. You can't just then turn around and try to pitch them on something and use it for actual advice and learning. Um, Another thing that you said that really resonates, which is a mistake that I see a lot of people make, is then just follow up. There are oftentimes I'll talk to some kid who wants advice, and they're, "Oh, how do I get into the data science?" And they might not be coding, they don't have the background, let's say, and I'll just tell them, "Oh, do a project, whatever, pick something you like." It could be sports. It could be anything you're interested in. And just do something, like do a little project on that thing that you're passionate about and come back to me and show me what you coded up. Now it's obviously a lot easier because you can like vibe code a lot of these things. But to be honest, that's still not going to solve the problem because the ultimate problem is that the vast majority of people will not actually go do that thing. And you just literally gave them the recipe for like following up with something super concrete. It's like on you to pick the thing that you want to work on. And just now you have an excuse to bug me again in a month and be like, "Hey, let me show you this thing I've built." Some people do it and some people end up like following up, that is I think one of the biggest differentiators. And it's obviously hard to go from 0 to 1 and make that initial phone call. But then once you get it, to cherish that mentor relationship and put in the additional work of just like following up. We're doing the one thing that they asked you to do in order to help yourself at the end of the day, because they don't care about your bullshit project you're working on, but it demonstrates that you can follow through and execute on something.
And how important it is to you, right? And so, a lot of times people just think, "Okay, well, I know somebody, I'm going to connect you," and then you get connected, and they think that that's the end all. But it's like you have to, by us asking, "Hey, why don't you go do this project?" or "Why don't you go to this show? I recommend you doing these couple of things." And then when they follow back up, it shows that how important it was to them. When they don't, you're kind of like, "Hey, I'm not going to take this call again," or I might take it to be nice, but I'm not gonna really listen because they didn't do the first things that I asked them to do the first time, right? And so you wanna be able to demonstrate to someone that, "Hey, I'm listening and taking your advice. You told me, hey, you should probably show up to these other events. They're really good for your new business and what you're working on. By darn it, I'm gonna try to figure out how do I get to those events and then come back to you and say, hey, Matej, that was great. They were really helpful,' or no, it wasn't. Here's what I did." And you might come back to me and say, well, because you didn't do XYZ. This is how I found it. Okay, like now I'm learning. Now we're building a relationship, right? And you move from there where you have people go and you're like, what did you learn from where you're at? And there's something like, and my dad told me a long time ago, is no matter what you're doing, there's always something for you to learn. I interned at a law office in college, and I remember I was telling him like, all day long I'm in the basement and filing papers. And he's like, "Hey," and I would complain about it a little bit, like, "Hey, I'm just filing papers. I'm not learning a ton of stuff." He's like, "No, no, you're learning something." He's like, "You're gonna learn to be the best paper filer that there possibly can be. There's something to learn in everything that you do, and so you have to figure out what is that one thing that you're learning that you can take on to something else." And that's kind of what I've been doing all my life, is like doing some of the things that people don't want to do because there's a ton of learning there, and then learning if you're doing something like, "Hey, what is the one thing I'm going to learn out of this
Yeah.
that I can keep building on?"
No, I love that, and it's, yeah, like, I've heard stories too of people that are working in the mailroom and then using that as it's a database, an old school database of papers, and you're a kid that gets access to data, and, yeah, like, just going and reading through a bunch of the papers in there is a way that it's things you never get access to otherwise, and now you can actually peek through it and see what's happening in that company. But I'm curious, like, besides your dad, have you had other mentors come up throughout your career, and what has that been like?
Yeah, I have. There's been early on, I had some really good mentor. I had a great mentor in this gentleman named Greg at Anderson Merchandisers, which I learned. That's where I learned to manage people really well, because you come in, you thought you knew what you were doing, and because like if when you do something, you expect everyone to do it the same way you do it. right? And it's like that's like a no-no in a sense of too. Like you're managing people. I was managing a large district, a lot of folks that were doing it, and my expectations was everyone was going to do the same thing how I did it, and I'm going to go and treat everyone that way. And it just I learned from him from like just how to manage people, where it's like what success looks like to me doesn't always look like that same thing to everybody else. And how you get there doesn't mean the same way. So, like, as long as the end game gets to the same goal point as a team, let them travel their own venture and you help guide them. And I was trying to like, joystick everything in early on, and it ran into like to be honest, like ran into problems because like you're too hardcore, you're on top of people, you're micromanaging, you're doing all that stuff, and I really learned from him as a mentor of here's the best way to manage people and to get the most out of them. I've had some other really great mentors just from a strategy and execution point. A gentleman by New Goyle, he was awesome. He was super phenomenal on helping me think through strategies and ideas. I would come to him with a ton of ideas and he'd be like, these are all great, like similar back to why don't you go back and put like your top three things you want out of here. He's an ex-consultant, so everything was top three, top three, top three of everything. And so I really learned from that aspect of like, all right, how do I can have all these great ideas, but how do I like synchronize and put them into like an action plan and work with them? And then, as I mentioned, Tony was a great mentor just in how to build a business, how to run a business, what to do and what not to do across the board. So, and there's other folks, outside of the business world that we look at just from good men and women that are just living life appropriately. And, how do you become a better father, a better husband to everybody, a better neighbor to people? And so you just kind of, what's important, what's not important. So I think life happens and things happen to you to help you take a step back and realize at times like, hey, I'm working too much. I need to spend more time here. And it slaps you in the face. So
Yeah, I'm curious on that last piece, and I mean, this is it's a good place to wrap up the conversation. Is around part of you in the beginning were trying to like do all these amazing things like take over the world, and then I feel like as you get older there's a second mountain where it's like, oh well, maybe there's my ego is not the only thing that matters. And to your point about being a better neighbor, being a better father, husband, I'm curious how you think of the two. Like, are you still in the phase of life where it's like, yeah, I want to take over, or are you looking to start giving back, or is that not even like, yeah, on your roadmap of how you're thinking about your life?
yeah, no, yeah, that's a deep, deep question, my man. I think right now it's like, I'm at that stage of where I want to help guide others. Like I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of bruises, bumps and bruises, a lot of wins, but it feels like I'm always been kind of like building on my own or have a smaller team to kind of go build because it's like, hey, this is a side project, and I've been successful at doing it. And then what I found has happened is that if I leave or someone like, there's no one to do, and everyone's like, I really love what you were doing. And so I feel like I want to give back and mentor. Why I joined Charm was a great opportunity to help us develop structure of the organization, the culture, everything around it with and a wonderful leader, Alex, who's leading Charm and the team there. So it's like, how do I can help build this business to a culture where people want to come work here? Want to be here and work with and understand like, hey, we're going to work really hard. We're going to have a lot of fun, but you also, you have to be good to your family and you have to be, spend time with them. So I've a lot of my mentors are older and some other folks are retired and stuff. And you start to realize, as you see, even from your father, it's like, it goes for so long. Everyone's like, yeah, I love you. You're awesome. You've been great in the business world. After so long, it's just more around the people and the relationships you built. It doesn't matter what title you have. It's just being kind and helping others. And I'm at that stage where, yeah, I still want to grow and lead an organization, but I also want to be able, how can I bring really great, smart, young folks into the organization, educate them and grow. And whether they stay with me or they go somewhere else, I want them to always look back as I talk to folks as I coach basketball and up to eighth grade and then they go to high school. And I say, my goal for you at the end of the day is I want the coach to say, hey, who did you have as a coach? But thank goodness someone who taught you all this stuff that I don't need to teach you. And if you were like side by side by somebody with the same skill set, you're gonna outpace them because you have a better IQ of the game because I taught you that leading into it. And so that's kind of where I kind of lead on the business world is I still want success. I'm still very eager and hungry to get after it and build something, but I want to make sure I've learned to building it the right way. Good culture, family oriented. Like, work is work; it'll be there when all said and done. You want to have good relationships with people in your personal life and work life, not centered around. I'm learning not to center around business. I talk a lot about business, and I have to learn myself not to talk a lot about business. I'll leave it at that.
Love it. I mean, I think it's a great philosophy of, yeah, it's not just about the success, it's about the people around you that you're collaborating with and spending all your time with, or the majority of your time, and also not forgetting about family, neighbors, other parts of life that are important. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's an amazing journey, and I look forward to seeing what you do over the next couple of years at Sean.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. We're exploding, so I'm looking forward to it. We're on our way up.
Awesome, Rodrigo. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.